Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's web conference. My name is Devyani Dey and I'll be serving as your moderator today. You'll be hearing a session from Sergey Chubarov. He is a Microsoft certified trainer, consultant, public speaker, Microsoft MVP in Azure, and a certified ethical hacker with over 10 years of experience. He's currently based in Russia. He'll be addressing the topic on this very timely subject, AZ-103, Managing, Securing Identities, and Governance and Compliance. Before that, I'm going to put a quick poll, and I would request all of you to kindly participate in the poll and let me know if I'm clearly audible to everyone. Thank you so much. And furthermore, if you face any audio or a video issue during the session, please feel free to drop in your queries in the Q&A panel, and I'm here to answer your questions. Now, I would like to turn today's event to your presenter. Sergey, you can take it from here.
Sure, thank you. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
Sure, I will.
How about now?
It's now visible.
All right, so now we can start.
Yes.
So today is our last day of our training course, quite long training course, and as usual we'll talk about AZ-103, Microsoft Azure Administrator, and it's still me. If you hear the first time, my name is Sergey. I'm an infrastructure team lead. I'm a trainer as well, certified Azure expert and AWS expert, and so on. And we'll talk about Azure Identities today. And first, as usual, we're going to cover introduction to certification, because maybe some of you here on the first day, and you have to know the structure of the exam before you're going to take an exam. So I repeat this information every day. Then we'll have part B, and part B will have technical content. And in part C, that's really a small part about practice question and some wrap up. All right. So part A, I'll try to be as quick as possible, but maybe some of you hear the first time, so I'm going to cover it anyway. So now Microsoft, last year, Microsoft changed the certification structure, and now certifications based on job roles, not the product, because we used to have exams about Windows 7, and then we'll have new exams about Windows 8 and after Windows 10, and the same with other products. So certification is based on product, not the job roles. Now it's different, and certification now it's not about on product only. Of course, job role includes some products like Azure or M365, but it's not about product, but it's about a job role. And we have Azure Administrator job role in Azure, Developer, Solutions Architect, DevOps Engineer, Security Administrator, and we'll have new certification in the future. This certification based on job roles. The first certification is like completely introduction to Azure, this certification is, I don't want to call it non-technical, but generally speaking, you don't have to be a really technical person to pass this exam. And many salespeople people take this exam from Microsoft partners and from Microsoft as a corporation. So this exam more about understanding concepts and basics. Then we have a level associate, and our administrator trained course is about associate, is about Azure Administrator Associate certification. Associate level is more about implementing, managing, configuring, and so on. And then expert level is about design and deeply understand the services and can build and ability to build a solution. So for fundamentals, if you want to take fundamentals, and if you're if you don't have any Microsoft certification, Azure certification, and you just thinking about to start from something simple, you may try AZ900 Azure Fundamentals, and you don't have to know a lot of technical content. You just need to know cloud concepts, core Azure services, and general principles about data privacy and so on. And take one exam, AZ900. But for our exam, AZ103, you have to be quite proficient with technology. So you have to know how to manage your Azure subscriptions, virtual machines, networks, storages, and so on. And we cover all of that previous 4 days. And today, that's the last module about identities. All right. So how about our exam? First of all, our exam has some questions. It's a test. So we have questions that we need to give an answer. But now Azure exams are not only tests, many of Azure exams are not only tests, but performance-based lab as well. So many Azure exams now include performance-based labs. And to pass the exam, you not only have to answer the questions, but complete tasks inside your lab. And it's quite tricky because, first of all, it's new for us. And the second, labs, they are really time-consuming. And new exams, they become challenges not because of their complexity, but because of time management. Before new exams, Microsoft exam took me around 40 to 60 minutes to pass, to complete. But with labs, I spent all 3 hours on the exam because it's much longer. So please manage your time properly, and just remember that you need lots of time to do your lab. And after the lab, you'll have a couple of more questions. So leave 10, 15, 20 minutes for the last questions, because after the lab, you'll have a bit more questions. Not so much, but you will. Not so many questions, but we will. And we also have case studies. Case studies, I love them personally. Case studies, it's when you have a case about company and number of questions about this case. And the biggest mistake of many students is to read the whole case. Don't do it. Read the question in your case, and then go to the section that was mentioned in your question, and you'll complete your case really quickly. All right, so that's our domains in our exam. We covered many of them. We didn't talk a lot about subscriptions and identities, so today we'll talk about that. How to prepare, first of all, Microsoft portal called Learn, then online courses like you're doing it right now, and you know what I mean, and instructor-led training when you can just take your train in a class and then not only have questions to a trainer, but also do labs. And it's really important because nothing can beat hands-on. Nothing can beat hands-on. All right, some additional resources, and this is our fifth module and the last one on this training course about managing identities and implementing governance. All right, let's start. We have lots of topics, but many of those topics are not really huge, so we'll be on time, hopefully. Let's start. First of all, oh, by the way, I think you're used to the fact that I do lots of demos, and this session will not be exclusion, but I have to begin from slides because we have to talk about Azure AD in general, and it's quite hard to show Azure AD in general without explaining the concepts. So let me first show you a couple of slides, and then we'll go to demo. Azure AD. In Azure, we have Active Directory. That is a directory for our cloud-based environment, and it's not a local AD in the cloud. It's not the same as local AD in the cloud, because our Windows AD, Windows Server AD, or on-premise AD, it uses LDAP, and Azure AD is completely different. But the same, but our Azure AD needs us for the same purpose. We need Azure AD to prove identity, to verify passwords, prove identities, authenticate, authorize, and we need this Azure AD to do that things. You can also provide a single sign-on to our applications and third-party applications as well. For instance, I can just log into third-party application with my Azure AD credentials and I can have single sign-on to this application. It can be integrated with our applications that we develop, and we can integrate our Azure AD with our local AD that we already have. So, benefits of Azure AD. Single sign-on, as we mentioned before, compatible with different devices, and that protect on-premise web applications with secure remote access. I think I need to show it to you a bit later. Extend Azure AD to the cloud, protect sensitive data of application. So generally, we have an AD, Active Directory, but in the cloud, it's scalable. It's managed by Microsoft, stable and protected. But of course, we have a portion of our responsibility. We have to manage our accounts, identities, and so on, configurations. But still, the underlying infrastructure and configuration of AD is really well protected. And in Azure AD, we have a number of editions. And the first edition is free. You get this edition when you just just sign up in M365 in Azure or Office 365. So when you have Azure AD, you have this Azure AD. When you have when you have services with Azure AD, based on Azure AD, you'll get your Azure AD for free. So Azure AD is a part of Azure AD free. You can get it with Office 365 when you register Office 365. So I bet you work with Azure AD free anyway. So then the next SKU is Azure AD Basic. I didn't see a lot of companies that use Azure AD Basic, but still, it gives us some self-service capabilities like self-service password management and group management by users. But I don't want to say it's really popular. Then the most popular SKU called Azure AD Premium P1. And Azure AD Premium P1 gives us lots of security features and management features, like conditional access. Of course, it includes everything that was in basic, like self-service capabilities, and much more, like conditional access. And Azure AD Premium P2, that's the most powerful edition in Azure AD, and it gives you 2 more services compared to Azure AD Premium P1, and one of those services we'll cover on this session. All right. So in Azure AD, we have tenants. And we can, and by default, we have one tenant, but we can have them more if we wish. Like in local AD, we can have multiple domains. So here we can have multiple tenants, and multiple tenants. We can create multiple tenants for resource independence, administrative independence, synchronization independence. Resource independence, administrative independence. I think you understand what I mean. What is that? Synchronization independence means that what if I want to synchronize my Azure, my local AD to Azure AD, and I have some limitations in my environment that I cannot synchronize I can only synchronize my local AD to only one local AD to one Azure AD. But what if I want to have some differentiation there? What if I want to have more freedom with synchronization? I have to have another tenant. For instance, if I want to synchronize my local AD to somewhere else, or maybe I have multiple domains and I want to synchronize one of my domains in one tenant and another my domain to another tenant, I can do it if I create new different tenants. So to synchronize our local AD to Azure, we have a tool called Azure AD Connect. Why do we need to synchronize our local AD, and and should we use Azure AD instead of local AD, and so on? Let's talk about that. First of all, if your company is new on the market, like a startup, you may start with Azure AD. You probably don't need to deploy your local AD servers and so on. I know lots of companies that start business a couple of years ago, and they don't use on-prem infrastructure at all. So they have everything in the cloud. They have Azure AD, they have Office 365, and they manage device with Intune. They don't have group policies and so on. And I know some companies that little by little move from local AD to Azure AD, but it's a long journey because we have lots of dependencies on-prem, and it's quite kind of hard to completely move. But the other companies, the most of companies in the world, they already have local AD, and after they already had local AD, they start to use something like Office 365, and they want to have some shared identities between Office 365 and Azure. They want to extend the AD to the cloud, so they want to have they want to keep infrastructure that they already have, that they already use, but have it also in the cloud and integrate new services like cloud services with the infrastructure that they already manage. So AD Connect can help here to integrate on-prem AD with Azure AD. In this case, our on-prem user accounts and groups, and if you wish, devices as well, will be synchronized to the cloud in one direction. So from on-prem to the cloud. And this synchronization, after the synchronization and during the synchronization, we have to before synchronization we have to configure that. We can configure several sign-in options, and you'll have these questions in the exam, so please remember that quite well. Different sign-in options. The first sign-in option called password hash synchronization. In this case, Azure AD Connect will synchronize our user accounts and their password hashes. And in this case, user will have the same password that he has on-prem. It will be quite convenient for users because they know just manage just one password. Find it in the cloud, but it's the same password as the user password on premise. So another option, this was the first option, but the problem is the first option, some companies don't want to synchronize their passwords in the cloud from security standpoints, from compliance, and they don't want to synchronize passwords in the cloud. For them, there is an option called path-through authentication, and in this case, the special agent will be deployed to one of the servers in the on premises. Let me just show you really quickly that we have got number of methods when we configure our Azure AD Connect. And if you just get there, you'll see the description about this method. So in this case, when you use path-through authentication, one of the servers, on-premise servers, will be deploying a special agent and request to verify the password will be sent to this agent, to this agent, and agent will contact local AD and will try to check the username and password against local AD. So in this case, companies can have authentication. They will have authentication in the cloud, but their password policies, they will be. What's the problem with the first option also? So we have different password policies in the cloud and on-prem. But here, in the second option, we'll have the same password policy. And the third option, that's for companies that wants to completely authenticate their cloud users on-prem. And it's called federation. We can get some benefits from federation, like some of the features they don't work without federation, like exchange, hybrid exchange configuration. But federation is quite complicated. So sometimes in exam you may have questions like, please choose the correct solution, but minimize the infrastructure and complexity. But ADFS, it's quite complex a way for sign-in. ADFS, in case of ADFS, when user try to authenticate in a cloud, it will be redirected completely to ADFS server on premises, and user will be authenticated on premises. That's a complete authentication on-prem. And you can enforce your on-prem policies. You can also configure some additional policy like multi-factor authentication on ADFS server. But that's a quite complex option because you need to have at least 2 ADFS servers for availability. And you cannot just deploy and publish your ADFS. you have to use a web application proxy to publish your ADFS securely. And you should have at least 2 ADFS proxies. So you need at least 4 servers for ADFS. And you need to have certificate because you have to upload to Microsoft, because Microsoft has to trust to your ID. It's quite complex. So that's why we have a number of options, and you may choose any option you need. Of course, ADFS is the most flexible. It gives you some additional features, like you may configure, as I mentioned before, multi-factor authentication on your on premises. You may configure some additional filtration options, but it's the most complex ways to sign in. All right, let me show you these options here in Azure AD Connect. When I start to install Azure AD Connect, it shows me this wizard. And this wizard, I have a number of options. So password hash synchronization, pass-through synchronization, federation, and we can also federate with third parties, like pin federate, or we can do not configure. And in this case, we'll have users in the cloud, but they will have absolutely separate passwords, and we have to manage their password and configure their password completely in the cloud. And we can also enable single sign-on. I believe we have a single sign-on for federation automatically. We don't need it here. Yeah, we don't need it here. That's for these options. So for the first two. And if we enable single sign-on, it will create an object SPN for the cloud in a local ID, and then users that already authenticate in our local ID may go to the cloud and pass the authentication. So it's a single sign-on for users that already authenticate on premises. Then when I configure my way for signing, I have to put my credentials, my global administrator in Azure AD. I already have some credentials here, and they're correct. So let me just type my password and click next. So type my password again. No. And I have multi-factor authentication here, so let me type this code. And let's see. It has to verify that I have all the permissions in the cloud. And now it's looking for my local ID, but this machine out of the local domain, so I don't have any AD domains here. It can't find any domains, so that's why I can't move forward and complete configuration. But here, in a normal way, I have to choose my domain, my forest. I have to type my enterprise admin credentials, configure some filtering if I wish. For instance, maybe I don't want to synchronize the whole domain. I want to synchronize only some OUs, and filter by user, by groups, and some optional features. We'll cover them in this session too. So you configure Azure AD Connect. It's quite straightforward, but it also has some premium, premium. Also has some hidden features that you may not find in the wizard, but you can configure them later. For instance, you may use transformation options. Transformation may give you a way to transform your users from when you synchronize them from on-premise to the cloud. For instance, maybe you want to change the username a pattern of the username. Maybe your username looks like, anyway, naming convention looks like, I don't know, the first letter of the name and the last name, and you want to change it to first name dot last name, just for example, and you want to do it automatically. So Azure AD Connect can do it either, but you have to do it after you configure your AD Connect in a wizard. You can do it. You cannot do it in the wizard here in the wizard. All right. Let me move on. So we talk about Azure AD in general. We talk about Azure AD Connect, but let me just go back a little bit to Azure AD. Let me show you some options that we discussed there. You won't find them on the exam, I believe, but it may be quite useful for you anyway. Let me show you a couple of stuff. Where is it? Okay, so I'm here. What I mentioned before that I can authenticate in a different cloud applications with my Azure AD credentials. Let me show it to you really quickly. Let me just go to wd.demo.wd.microsoft.com. So it's not my Azure and not my Office 365. That's a public service. Windows Defender ATP test ground. But I need to sign in to download something from here. Let me try to sign in. And it sees that I have admin Azure AD account, and it allows me to authenticate here, sign in with my Azure AD. And because I'm an admin in my Azure AD, I can also give this Azure AD and this third-party app read access to other user profiles, and other users may authenticate in this app. Other user from my company, of course, from my ID, can authenticate in this app without this consent. So if I give an admin consent, then all my users will may authenticate in this app without any consent, and this app will be added to the dashboard. So this how can I authenticate in external apps? It may be Microsoft apps, or maybe not Microsoft app. It may be my development, my app that I created myself, and we'll use Azure AD as a provider for the identities. And what else do we have? We had it on the slide. We can publish our application on-prem to the whole world via Azure, and it's called Application Gateway. If I go to my Azure AD, and I go to my Application Gateway here, I can see that they asked me to download connector, and I already did that. So I download connector, and it's still active. And then I went to Enterprise Applications, add new application, chose on-premise application, and filled information. So that's the name of app in Azure, internal URL. So that's the URL for the URL of this app inside of my network. So what it will do, I download connector, and I will get an access to my apps that on premise and behind the firewall through this connector. And I need to tell an internal address of this app tell this address to the connector. So let's do it. App one. That's not. I think I mistyped somewhere here. Okay, that works. And then external URL, that's a URL that will be used by Azure. I'll call it app1 again. And it has the free domain by default, but I can connect my domain here. And of course, I need to add DNS record in my public DNS, but anyway. And I can select pre-authentication here. So user has to authenticate first in Azure AD, and only after that it will get to the on-premise app. So it's not a filter for users. Let me just show you really quickly. I already have my app. It's published. It's called remote desktop web, so it's my RDS web published via Azure. If I go to application gateway proxy, application proxy. Oh, sorry, it's called not the gateway, application proxy. And let me take this address. I can copy that, paste here. And now to authenticate me in Azure AD. I don't know why it's so slow. Let me jump to here to the configuration. Maybe I'll show you something else before. What can I also do here in the application proxy? I can assign my app, and only user that has this app assigned. What's going on? Only this user will have an access to my on-prem app that published to the whole world via Azure. I have no idea what's going on. Let's see what, maybe something's wrong with my app. Let's see if it's work. RDS. No, it works fine. So something's going on with application proxy. Let's check it really quickly. Oh, now I can see it. So I publish my RDS gateway to the whole world via Azure. And even if I give you the link to this application gate to this app, you cannot get it because I choose to authenticate pre-authentication in Azure AD, and I assign this app to me. Yeah, it's assigned to me only, and all other users, if they have to pass authentication, and Azure will say you don't have an access to this app. So that's about Azure AD application proxy. I hope it was clear, and let's move on. Here. The other topic called Azure AD join. So because we have an Azure AD, and if this is the directory, we can join our devices to our AD, like to the local AD. When in the same manner, we can join our devices to Azure AD. So you already know how to join the device to local AD. Go to properties, change settings, change this name, choose a domain. But how about Azure AD? If you want to join your machine to Azure AD, First of all, you can do it when you just set up your Windows 10 and it asks you to join your machine to Azure AD. But if you want to do it afterwards, you can just go to Accounts. And here, as you can see, I don't have any options to join to Azure AD. Why? Because it's server. That's a Windows server, and they're not really suitable for Azure AD. So Azure AD is more about endpoints, for workstations and user devices. But if I go to the same menu from workstation, I can go to account, access worker school account, and here I can connect my workstation to Azure AD. So join this device to Azure AD. Let me type my username. And password. Password is. I hope it was correct. It is. So it warns me that this device may be managed by my organization. And is it correct organization? I would say yes, of course. I want to join. Waiting a couple of seconds. And if I go back, sorry, not here, go to my Azure AD and go to devices. I number devices here. Let me try to find this device, Commando. Yeah, here we go, Commando. So that's the name of a device, enabled, OS Windows, version, join type. Let me just zoom in. That's important. Join type. It's Azure AD joined, but we also can add join type. Let me check if I have it here. Not sure about that. We also have hybrid AD joined device. Oh, here we go. I have it. Hybrid AD joined. So what does mean hybrid AD joined? It means that this device exists in my local AD, and this device was synchronized with Azure AD Connect, and there's an option Azure AD Connect, synchronized device as well. And this device will be called hybrid Azure AD joined. I will show you how can we use it a bit later, but just for your knowledge, the Azure AD, when we just connect manually on some other way this device to Azure, but when we synchronize this device from our local AD, this device will be hybrid Azure AD joined. All right. That's too much. So when I join my device to the, so something went wrong. I have no idea why. To be honest, I don't really care because I don't want to join this device to my Azure AD. But anyway, usually it's fine. Let's see if I still have my command. No, I don't anymore. Good. So that's the way how I can join the device to Azure AD, and there is a couple of ways to join, and maybe Azure AD joined or hybrid AD joined. So let me check this box. And we have also a topic about users and groups here in the end, but I think we should discuss it right now about users and groups because that's the basics. So let's talk about users and groups. In Azure AD, we of course have users and groups, not only devices. And in the first row, we have users there. And I can create users manually here, like just click new user and fill the information about this user. There's nothing special here, to be honest. The only exception, I would say, directory role. That's a new for those who work only with only Azure AD. But name, username, profile, some properties. Property, just one property, and groups to join. That is quite common. And directory role, we'll talk about that a bit later. So it's quite straightforward to create a new user, but we have not only users in our directory, but we also have external users. We can add some users that from other directories, or create a completely new guest. They have to have some identities anyway, but as you can see, I have a user called guest. Not called, but the type of this user is guest. If I click here, this user from external Azure AD, so that's one of the Microsoft employees. But this user is guest, and I may give some permissions to this user. If I try to find me, I have my account, my personal account, and if I click here, it says Azure AD self-service. Generally, it's just a Microsoft account, Azure AD self-service. So we can also have some external users, not only internal. And we also can synchronize our users. We mentioned about that when we talk about ID Connect, but as you can see here, I have a source. I have a column called source, and in this column, I may see that some users were synchronized from Azure AD, from local AD, sorry, from local AD. So that users from Windows Server. I didn't create this user here in Azure, so it went here from Windows Server. That's about users. Nothing special, nothing complicated here. And of course, the users, they have their own passwords. But if I have something like federation or path authentication, I can't manage my passwords here, and I have to manage them on premise only. Let me just show you. So I have my user here that was synchronized from Windows Server AD, and I click here, click reset password, and it says, oh really? Let's try with a different user, just in case. This user also from local AD. Let's try, but it has to give me an error. I have no idea. Usually we cannot do it. We have to do it from our local AD. Anyway, maybe because I have a password right back. Maybe because of that. Okay, but we did it. But generally speaking, we can manage our users here in the in the cloud and manage their passwords. But the source will still be Windows Server. But we have not only users, but we have groups as well. So Azure AD groups. And with Azure AD groups, I can also create some groups. It's quite straightforward. Just click here and say create a new group. The group has a name. Let's create a group AZ103. And the biggest difference between groups in our local ED and in Azure ED, that in Azure ED we have different membership type for groups. We have assigned group, it means static membership. We have dynamic groups with dynamic user, dynamic device. On-prem, we can also do that on-prem, but it's a bit tricky. And we also had an exchange by default. So assigned means a static membership, but dynamic means that this membership will be based on the query, not just a static assignment. Let me show you. Click dynamic user and go here to query. And let me just choose when country of user equals UK, and it's on query. And in this case, members of this group will be users with UK field, with a field country. When they have a value in a field country UK. That's about dynamic users. Let me show you another way called dynamic device. So dynamic device, it's a group for devices. And if I choose here, I have attributes. I have devices attributes here, and I can choose something like device OS type, Windows. So the member of the group will be only PCs that on Windows, and in this case, it will be dynamic membership group that contains devices. And the question that I had the question, so I decided to discuss this question every time when I talk to participants about groups in Azure AD. How to create a group that will contain dynamic users and dynamic devices at the same time. We need to have a group that will contain both, not only dynamic users and not only dynamic device, but both of them. How to do that? We don't have this option. So we can choose dynamic user or the dynamic device. We cannot have them both. How can we do that? We can create a new group. We can create 3 groups. First group will be dynamic device, and it will be membership type will be dynamic. The second group will be dynamic user with a dynamic membership, and the third group will be static with assigned membership. And I will add both dynamic groups, to this static group. And in the end of the day, I will have a group that contains dynamic users, dynamic device at the same time. So that's a trick that you can use to have users and groups, dynamic users and dynamic groups at the same time in your Azure AD. All right, let's see how we cover users and groups. Let's talk briefly about multi-factor authentication. One of the first things that you should consider is MFA, because as I mentioned before, Azure AD is quite well protected. So Microsoft manage Azure AD is really well, but your users, they have to protect their account themselves. And are you 100% sure that your users have strong password? They have strong passwords, or they don't share their credentials somewhere in the web or between colleagues, or they may register to different external resources with Azure AD account. Not account, but they can for instance, sign up on some forums or some vulnerable websites with their Azure AD email address, with their work address, and the same password. Just for example, for instance, my email, my Azure AD email address, then email address that linked to Azure AD account is, for instance, Sergey at whatever.com. And just let's imagine, and my password, something like password. Let's imagine that let me show you this website. I think you know this website. Have I been pwned.com. Okay, let's see. Let's imagine that I sign up for Abuse with Us with my corporate credentials, with my corporate password and corporate email and corporate password, the same password that I use for my email. And then this website was hacked, or maybe it was initially a malicious website. And in this case, I can lose my credentials and somebody can just pick them up and sign into our Azure AD. So protection of identities is really important. And to do that, one of the first options you have to consider is MFA, multi-factor authentication. Let me show you really quickly. If I go to my users and click here, multi-factor authentication, let me find my user Jado, and I can see that this user John Doe has a status of multi-factor authentication as enforced. So in this case, I have to just not just know the password, but I have to have some tokens or other factors to get inside to authenticate. And I can configure here on the second step what methods are allowed for my users. Maybe a phone call, text message, notification, verification. I can also configure skip MFA from particular IP addresses. And you may have this question on exam, by the way, so play with that. All right, so that is MFA. I can configure MFA per user on user basis. And every single user, I recommend that every single user have to have MFA enabled. But if your company don't want to implement MFA for every user, at least do it for your admins. It's really important because especially global admins, but not only for them. Other admins are quite important too. I will show you director roles a bit later. And what I can also have, maybe you don't want to configure MFA for every single sign-in, and you want to configure MFA to sign into particular applications, for instance, not to every single application. For instance, maybe I don't care if user connects to WD demo.wd.com. So he may connect to this application without any MFA. But if user connects to authenticate in my mailbox, in his user mailbox, corporate mailbox, then I want my user to have MFA. So how can you configure that? This is called conditional access. And that's a premium feature of Azure AD P1. Conditional access. Here you go, conditional access. So we can configure access based on number of conditions. And let me show you how to configure that, and then I will show you some policy that I already have. So I click New Policy. AZ 103. So for what users this policy will be assigned? For which users? To all, to selected, or to roles, or to guest, or I can assign to everybody and exclude somebody else. So I have a number of choices. For instance, assign to all and exclude somebody else. I personally don't want to configure anything here, so I'll just click None and close that. Then I will go to Cloud Apps or Actions. This means Cloud Apps or Actions means that I can configure app here or some user actions, but user actions, it's a new feature, so I have only one action here. So generally we talk here about Cloud Apps. And I want to configure this policy when user trying to sign in to particular Cloud app, for instance, or maybe to all apps if I wish, or as usual to all apps except. I want to configure restrictions when user sign in to my Office 365 Exchange Online, so to his mailbox. I can do it. All right, so that's about app. And then I can configure conditions. And the first condition, sign-in risk. We'll talk about sign-in risk a bit later. Let me just show you that it has high, medium, low, and no risk. But what is sign-in risk and where can I get it? I'll show you a bit later. Device platform. That's like Android, Windows, and so on. Locations. That's my locations that I create before. So I can create location here. Let me show you. Here in locations. And then I can provide an access based on location. For instance, I know one of the customers wanted to have an access to the cloud only from the IP address of his company and nothing more. So it was impossible to work from home with cloud service and so on. That's craziness for most of the companies because in this case productivity will be low, but that company thought a lot about security and they decided to do like that. So you may configure to, for instance, choose any location here and exclude trusted location, and then configure your policy to block access. And in this case, access from anywhere will be blocked except trusted locations. And trusted locations, or select locations, that's my office, my company IP address. All right, client app. When I connect from the browser or from the application like mobile app or desktop client, and device state. Device state, we have to enable it for all devices and exclude devices that mark it as compliant, but we didn't talk about compliance here. I mean compliance of devices. That's a Microsoft 365, not Azure. And here I can exclude devices that hybrid ID joined. Do you remember I showed you that I have some devices that hybrid ID joined? So I can exclude them from my policy, and for instance, I can create a policy to block access to, for instance, Exchange on Ledger ID. So I can configure the number of conditions here, and then I go to access controls, and I'll configure to block access or to grant access, but ask something additional, like require MFA, multi-factor authentication. Let me show you that. I have some policy already pre-created. And let's see first policy. First policy is an access to Exchange Online for user msmith from to application Exchange Online, and condition is client app, is browser, and in this case, msmith has to use MFA to authenticate. Let's try. Go to portal.azure.com, msmith, my domain. So there's no MFA for this user. And if we check portal, MFA portal here, try to find this msmith. There's no MFA. MFA is disabled for this user. And as you can see here, we really don't have MFA. So it's authenticated without any problems. But let me go to my mailbox. With the same credentials. And they send me a pull request. So MFA was enabled for my mailbox only when I tried to have access to mailbox only. All right, so that's one of the policies. Let me just get on that. Let me show you another policy. For the same msmith, I believe it is. In the application here, SharePoint Online, and conditions, device platform, Android, and we will block access when msmith trying to have an access to SharePoint from Android. I don't know why I closed the window, but let me just show you again that I have an access to SharePoint. For this user. And it looks like it works fine. Yeah, it is. Let me try to do it from Android. So I'm gonna go to here, RDS. Let me connect to my Android emulator. Unfortunately, it doesn't have integration service with Hyper-V, so I have to fight with mouse here with pointer, mouse pointer. finally, I opened up the browser. Now let me try to go to the same website, but from Android device. That's Android was installed on my virtual machine. And it works quite slowly, unfortunately. Okay, so I'm gonna go to SharePoint here. Come on. Please do it. Okay, so I have an account here. Let me choose my account. Type my password. And try to sign in. And sorry, you cannot access this right now. And to be honest, I cannot access it at all because my policy prevents me to access that. So that's called conditional access, and that's access based on some conditions. Really handy service. Please try it yourself if you didn't try it before. All right, let's move on from here. Now let's move to Azure AD Identity Protection. And after this service, I will give over to Divyani, and she will ask you some interesting questions. Let me find Azure AD Identity Protection here. Here we go. So Azure AD Identity Protection, that's the service that can help to protect accounts from compromisation, some identity attacks, and different issues, configuration issues. So it used machine learning and Microsoft research to find some problems with accounts and sign-in events, and it adds some risk to account when some events occurs. And do you remember in conditional access I told you about sign-in risk? So we can use this sign-in risk to give or not access or ask for MFA. For the risky user, we can block access at all, or we can ask them for MFA always. Just show you really quickly. So Azure AD Identity Protection here. And by the way, you have to have a license, Azure AD Premium P2. So that's the most powerful, but at the same time most expensive license for Azure AD. And then you'll have this service. So I can see my users that flag for risk. And Michael Smith is the most risky user. Risk events. Most of the time, it's risk events, sign-ins from anonymous IPs, or sign-ins from a familiar location. And some of them sign-ins from infected device. Let me go to my configuration of my policies, and I can say that's like conditional access. So we may use conditional access, or you may use native wizard to configure these restrictions. I like conditional access more. It's more flexible, but let me just show you here. So I can configure user policy. What does it mean user policy? User policy means that the state of user state. It's not a particular moment, but user state in general. So for all users or for individuals, I can configure conditions like user risk high, medium, high is the best candidate. When users they have high risk, then block access for this user or require to change their password. That's user risk policy. We also have sign risk policy. This policy works. The second policy works when users sign in during sign-in, and I have my policy configured. So here I have msmith as usual, and condition risk is medium or and above. And I asked for MFA for multi-factor authentication. You remember that msmith doesn't have any MFA. He doesn't have to use any MFA. But let me try to simulate some risks. First, let me connect to my Office 365 account. And my password. And it works. Looks like it worked. Yeah, it works. And now let me do the same, but I will have an access to this account for the same user, but from Tor browser. And Tor browser, that's an anonymous IP, so that's a risky sign-in. Tor a bit slow, so let me in parallel open up Google, and let me show you all risky events for this service. Azure AD Entity Protection. Events. Let me type my username and password here. And here we go. Suspicious activity detected. And they ask me to verify my identity, and I have to verify it with different ways. So that's how it works. I had a risky sign in, so that's why they asked me for MFA. Let me show you, and you may have on an exam questions about sign risk events and about their severity and about their risk level. If you go to this article, Azure AD risk events, you'll find all the events here, and you may read about them closely. For instance, users with leak credentials. That's the highest risk, and that's when if Microsoft finds your Azure AD credential somewhere on the web, and they also find the password, and they can authenticate to this password. That means that your credentials are really, really vulnerable. So they mark your account as leaked, and you may have a policy to ask for to ask your users to change password. Signing from anonymous IP, I did that a couple of minutes ago. Impossible travel to atypical locations. I think you know what is that. And when I tried to sign in from different locations almost at the same time, sign in from affected devices. That's when I sign in from devices that were affected by bot service. Was infected by what that was reported to by bot service. Sign in from IP address with suspicious activity is when we can connect from IP addresses from which Azure had lots of failure attempts. And sign in from unfamiliar locations. That's my favorite because I usually get this alert because I travel a lot. You better know these risks quite well. All right, so that's about it. That's about identity protection. And from here, let me ask Devyani to launch her poll.
Thank you, Sergey. So while Sergey takes a quick breather break, I would like to ask audience how has been the audio video experience so far in this session. The question and the options will appear on your screens now. Your feedbacks are really important to us. Given it's our last session for AZ103, I would request all the participants to kindly participate in all the poll questions. Your feedbacks are considered when we plan for our upcoming session. So your feedback through the poll question or through Q&A panel will be very much appreciated. And before I hand it back to Sergey for further training steps, I would like to ask one more question. The question will appear on your screens now. Thank you so much for your feedback. There will be a couple of more questions towards the end of the session, just like the other days. I would really appreciate it all of you can stay and participate in those poll questions as well. Now, I would like to hand over the session back to Sergey if he is available.
I'm here.
All right. You can take it from here, Sergey.
All right, so I guess you can see my screen. So the next service that we have in Azure AD, and it's quite handy to know how to deal with that, called self-service password reset. This service allows to users change the password themselves and write back this password back to local AD. That's the reason, by the way, why I changed password in Azure and it was successful, because I have password right back. So that's why I can just change my password in the cloud, and this password will be synchronized back to my local environment. So self-service password reset. Let me just show you really quickly. First of all, when you configure your AD Connect, you have to configure password right back there. And in this case, when you configure that, you will have this option on the portal. If you go to password reset, you can say that self-service password reset is available for all users or for selected users. And when user sign in the first time, it will have a message that he has to add his additional authentication, set up some second factor, not second factor authentication, set some factor to for password reset. For instance, mobile phone, usually number of mobile phone, and his preference about this factor, like to get a phone call or a short message. It may look like that. I already have it pre-configured. I may just show you. So if I open up my new window and I go to my portal.azure.com, and I can say I can't access my account, and it was a work or school account. And look, I'm using here my account that was synchronized from my on-prem ID, so it's not a cloud account. And then I'm gonna type some little CAPTCHA and click next. All right, so I have to remind my phone number. I'll click next and wait for my verification code. All right, I got it. And click next. So here we go. I can enter new password. And change my password. And in a couple of seconds, around 30 seconds, this password will be synchronized back to my local ID. And I need to enable password write back when I configure my Azure AD Connect, but we can also do it here on the portal. I think here. No, not here. What about here? No. Properties. Authentication method. I think they redesigned because we had this option on a portal as well, and now I can't find it here. Anyway, you have to just remember, you have to also configure it when you install your Azure AD Connect. There is a checkbox called password write back. Don't forget about that, because here I allow my users to on the portal. I allow my users to change their password, but it has to be enabled password write back for the password to read. Oh, it has to be somewhere here. On-prem integration. Oh, write back passwords to on-premise ID. Now it's here. So I configured when I enable synchronization, but I can go here and do it afterwards. All right. So let me show you another option for authentication methods called password protection. Password protection, I can say that I want to have a password that my users cannot use. And I will enforce this restriction for my user, and I can enforce this restriction even to my on-prem ID. So I could just create a list of passwords they cannot use, and they will not use it in Azure, and I can enable it for my local environment, and I need to also install some agents on my local environment to connect to here. It's not a big deal. You may find the guidance how to do that. And then my users in my local environment, my on-prem ID, cannot use this password either. All right, so that's self-service password management. Let's jump from here to subscription accounts and role-based access control. Here. And as you can remember, here in Azure, we have subscriptions and tenants. And I think that was on Thursday when I had a question. What's the difference between tenant and subscription? So the difference is that tenant, that's there's a namespace for our accounts, our resources, but that subscription, that's the entity that allows us to have some services. Like if I have Azure subscription, I can just have money to create virtual machines and others. If I have subscription for Exchange, I can have mailboxes, but subscriptions, they don't do any authentication, authorization, and so on. It's just more financial. It's more about financials and licensing, but accounts, it's more about our names, users, authentication, and so on. So let me just connect to another account because I have subscriptions there. Let me approve this request. And I want to stay signed in. So let me go to some subscriptions from here. Let me click the subscription. Close that. And here, what can I do in my subscription? Of course, I can see my expenses here, and I can also control access to my subscription. I give access to somebody else if I wish somebody else to manage my subscription. I don't want to do it now. I can also see what resource do I have in this subscription. So that's all the resource that's connected to my subscription, and I can see usage and quotas. In Azure, we might have some quotas, and this quota may give us a number of restrictions. Let's see. All. So I can only have one network watcher, and I already have it. I can have, in my subscription, I can have 350 cores, processor cores. I can have 250 storage accounts. I can have up to 1,000 public IP address. What else? What about virtual machines? So how many virtual machines can I have? Virtual machines. I can have up to 25,000 virtual machines per region, I guess. Yep, per region. What else? Some processors and so on. That's interesting. I can have 25,000 virtual machines and only 350 cores. I've never seen virtual machines without virtual cores. Anyway, so that's this quota. I can have these quotas, and if I need more, I can request for increase, and in this case, support will increase my quota. That's not a big deal. So just be aware of that. If you extensively use Azure, you may get to your core to a quota. That's a soft quota. You can request for more. All right. So from here, let's go to resources and how to manage access to the resources and to into subscription. First, let's talk about management to our Azure AD delegation of management Azure AD in general. If I go to back to Azure AD and go to roles and administrators, I will see a number of roles that I already have pre-configured, and I can add users to these roles. And in this case, users will have an access to some Azure AD management features. And please don't confuse roles and groups. So I also have groups. I have a filter here, I guess. Oh, that's a different subscription. That's fine. I have groups and I have roles. And that's different entity with different purposes. Roles, that's a management for my Azure AD in services. But groups, that's a management of my resources. And I can just give an access like I give an access to on-prem files. I can give an access to groups to some particular resources, or I can assign policies to groups. But here, roles means that when somebody gets this role, it can do some management on my tenant level. And of course, I have different roles. Some of the roles don't give lots of permissions, but still. My suggestion: be really careful with the roles, because some of the roles are really important. I know many companies, they care about global administrator. The global administrator is the primary administrator of the company, but they forget about other roles. For instance, Exchange administrator. If somebody gets the Exchange administrator, especially if your user has Exchange administrator and this user was hacked, and hacker gets Exchange administrator, what Exchange administrator can do? For instance, Exchange administrator can log in to your Exchange console and forward all the emails from your top manager's mailbox, for instance, to their mailbox. And Exchange administrator is not global admin, but he can do a lot of malicious stuff. Something else with SharePoint administrator, because if you use SharePoint, then SharePoint administrator can log in and download some documents, or create some routing rules, and then documents will be sent to some other address or some external address automatically. Security administrator, of course, it can manage a lot of security. User administrator can manage users, groups. What else? Help desk can reset passwords. So just remember this. This role is maybe quite dangerous too. Conditional access administrator, compliance administrator, billing administrator. Billing administrator is quite funny because this administrator can manage bills and requests for services. And for instance, if this bill administrator requests for some expensive services, the company has to pay for that. So just remember that we use roles, but roles, we have them a lot. We have a lot of these roles, and we just need to add our users to the role, but be accurate with that. Let me just go to my service administrator, and I can see a description here, and I can see what permissions this role has. So you can see what permissions the role has if you need. So that's about roles. And you can also manage access to your resources. If you go to any resource, go to access control and go to add here and add role assignment. And here, first you need to choose the role, and this role is it's not the Azure AD role. That's the role for a resource. So it's a bit different roles. Role for a resource, that's one role, one type of role, and roles for Azure AD is a different type of roles. So here, for every single resource, we have the same role called three same roles: owner, contributor, and reader. But other roles, they're specific to the resource that we want to provide an access. Because this resource is a recovery service vault, then I can provide access like backup contributor, backup operator, log analytics reader, site recovery contributor, and so on. And if I go to some other resource, traffic manager, you have the access control here, and click add, and add a role assignment. And then I can see other roles here. Of course, I have owner, contributor, and reader, but I also have, I don't have a backup operator anymore, but I have traffic manager contributor, for instance. So that this sort of role is different. And now I have to assign somebody to this role, and here groups come into play. Not only groups, by the way, but groups as well. So I have some groups here. I believe, yeah, all devices, all computers, Intune users. So it's all groups. I can assign access to groups here. So I add groups to roles. It's quite straightforward, but just I want to highlight about some of the roles. Three basic roles: reader, contributor, and owner. You should remember what's the difference between owner and contributor. So contributor can manage content, but contributor cannot manage the access. Contributor cannot manage role assignments, but owner can do both. Owner can manage content, I mean the resource, and access to the resource. Contributor can manage resource only. And on exam, you may have some questions like give a permission to the user or to the group, choose the correct role with the with the principle of least privileges. I think you know what's the principle of least privileges, so don't give too much permissions to somebody. Give the least amount of permission that this user needs for their day-to-day job. All right, so that's the role and group management and subscription management. So role-based access control. Yeah, we discussed. Let's talk about Azure policies now. Azure policy. That's gonna be our last topic. Azure policy. What our Azure policy is? Let me just find my Azure policy. Azure policy, generally it's for compliance and governance, but we can also use it for some technical stuff, to apply some restrictions, but it's more for governance. And Azure policy, that's the way how can we assign a number of policies to our subscriptions or resource groups in this subscription, and it will say how many resources in this resource group on the subscription are compliant with our policy, how many of them not, and we can also configure some remediations if we wish. I already have some policies here, and these policies, they're pre-configured because I use Azure Security Center, and Security Center, when I configure Security Center to manage my resource, it creates some policies for my resources. But I also have something custom here, and I'll show it to you really quickly. So I have number of policies. I already have number of policies here. If I go to remediation, I have some remediations for some of the policies. For instance, I have a policy called ASC, Azure Security Center, data protection, and this ASC data protection automatically deploys threat detection on my SQL services. So that's my remediation, and then let me show you policy themselves. So many of those policies, they're pre-configured, but I have some custom policies here. Let me show you really quickly. So I have lots of built-in and to custom, and I have custom policy that that does something. This policy says only allow a certain VM platform image. What is that? Let's check. So the description. This policy ensures that only Ubuntu server canonical, by canonical, is allowed from the image repository. And it works for my subscription call for this subscription. And here I can see my JSON template for this policy. So this policy for type of resource like disks, virtual machines, and scale sets, and it will not be applied for the this policy will not be applied for a resource that is that from publisher by image publisher called canonical, and in canonical and the image author of this canonical has to be Ubuntu server, and the image SKU is Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. So for the resource by canonical and that has an image Ubuntu server and SKU 18.04 04 LTS, this policy will not apply because this policy has an effect, deny. So it denies everything except this particular image. So Ubuntu 1804 LTS. So I create this policy, and then I have to assign this policy. So I go to assign policy, choose my scope. I can choose my subscription and my resource group if I wish, or I can assign to the whole subscription. So let's see. Let me go to my resource group. No, not resource group. Just go to virtual machines. And click Add. Here, I need to choose another subscription. I personally don't care about the resource group, but I have to choose something. All right, so let's give a name to virtual machine. I call it WS. And let me change the data center region. All right, so let me first choose Windows Server. Let me set up a username here and password. Let me repeat this password. I don't care about all of that. Click next, click next, next again. Let me turn it off. Click next, next, and next. All right, let's see. Here we go. It says validation failed, and you cannot create this resource. Why? Because this resource was disallowed by the policy. And what the policy called only allow a certain VM platform image prevent me to use this image. All right, let's try something else. Let me go back. Let's change the name to UB16. So let's try to use Ubuntu, but Ubuntu will be 1604. And let's use password. Oh, the same password. I think I'm fine, so let me go. Let's move forward. Let's click create and wait again. And validation failed again. Let's see, a resource was disallowed by the policy. Let's try again, but this time we'll choose Ubuntu 1804. Let's change the name to UB18. So, and let's see. And here we go. Validation passed. Now I can create virtual machine because Ubuntu 1804 is allowed. That's a bit tricky. Sometimes it's a bit tricky to find the correct information about your resources. Let me just show you really quickly. My custom type, custom. So I need to know a bunch of information about my resource. For instance, I need to know image publisher, and that's canonical. I need to know the image author, that's called Ubuntu server, and I need to know SKU. You can get this information via PowerShell. For instance, if I just want to know about publisher, maybe I don't. Let me choose Ubuntu here. I don't need any PowerShell. Let me just purpose image here. Oh, here you go. So it says canonical. It's canonical, but as you can see here, all other information, that's a bit different. So now I see that Ubuntu server has spaces, and SKU name has spaces, and my policy it has dashes, I believe. How can I know the real name that I can use? I need PowerShell for that. So with PowerShell, I can get this information quite easily. All right, so that's Azure policy, but in Azure policies, we do have not only policies, but initiatives also. Let me show you really quickly. So if I go to my definitions, zoom out. I here have policies and initiatives. What's the difference between policies and initiatives? Let me zoom out really quickly, and you'll see. It's too much. So as you can see here, initiative contains policy. So as you can see here, policies number, and for instance, this policy contains, this initiative contains 82 policy, this initiative contains 45, others contains 2, this contains 39. So generally speaking, initiative is just an object, just an instance, in a way, how can we deploy many policies at once? It's like a baseline. If you compare it technically with, I can compare it with group policies, on-premise group policies. When we configure a group policy, we have a group policy object that contains a number of policies. And this group policy object can be deployed to the whole workstation, and you'll get lots of policies at once. So that's the same with initiative. So initiative, that's a number of policies at once. When we want to just deploy a package of policies, not every single individual policies, but we want to deploy a package for compliance perspective, from compliance perspective and others. You want to deploy the number of policies to your servers, workstations, usually servers, of course, your applications. You may use initiative. So then you go to assignment, and you just assign initiative in the same manner as I assigned my policy, but this time I will use initiative as an object. Everything else is the same. All right. That's Azure policies. Let me jump to our last chapter, and our last chapter is about questions, practice questions. I'll go through practice questions with you. Then I will see if you have any questions in the Q&A, and we'll finish our last session. All right, so practice questions. Question number 1, what are requirements for implementing Azure AD, Identity Protection? Requirement number 1, it may be used for global admins only. Number 2, user must have Azure AD Premium P2 license. MFA must be enabled for users. ADFS is required. The answer is Number 2, user must have Azure AD Premium P2 license. You configured app protection policy for Outlook on mobile devices, and users, they can bypass this we didn't talk about that, to be honest. Just a bit off topic, but it may be interesting for you. So app protection, that's a policy that can control user experience inside of the application. For instance, do not download attachments from Outlook, only see it in the client, stuff like that. Do not forward, and so on. So you configure app protection policy for Outlook on mobile device, but users bypass it using native email client. So iOS and Android, they have native clients, and you may connect to your mailbox with native client. So which conditional access configuration may stop them from doing that? It's number one, device platform configuration, client app configuration, device state configuration, and approved client app configuration. The answer is approved client app. In this case, if we configure approved client app, users can connect to some services only with approved app. And for our Exchange Online, approved app is Outlook and browser. So users cannot connect to Exchange Online with Android native client or iOS native client, only with Outlook. All right, question number 3. You're deploying VM with a large number of vCores in Azure, but it fails before deployment starts. What may be a reason? Choose all. You exceed your cores limit, you exceed your VMs limit, Azure policy stops you from creating VM, and you don't have permissions to create VMs. Let's see. To be honest, the correct way, the second one, you exceed your VMs limit, is also correct, but it's not really possible. Maybe it's possible, of course, but you saw that limits for cores and for VMs, they're quite different, and you will have you will exceed your core limit before you exceed your VMs limit. But generally speaking, the second option is correct too. And Azure policy may stop you from creating VM. All right, question number 4. You need to create a group in Azure AD that has dynamic device and dynamic user membership. What type of group membership you need to configure? Static or assigned? Office 365 group, dynamic user, dynamic device. I believe you remember that. So it's gonna be static membership or assigned. And question number 5. You're deploying Azure AD Connect. You want to verify users' credentials when on-premises domain controllers. What authentication method should you configure? Solution must minimize number of servers required. Let's see. Password writeback is not about our assigning method. Password hash synchronization will not give us an option to verify credentials on premises. It will be verified in the cloud. So we have 2 options here, but federation requires lots of servers. So it's not. In this case, we cannot minimize this number. So the correct number is number 2, pass-through authentication. All right, so we've done with our content, and I hope it was informative for you. We had 5 days of webinars in online format. I try to make it as much useful as possible because you, for the real world and for the exam, from my perspective, it's much more useful to see and have an experience. Of course, I cannot give you my experience directly, but I can show you, and I try to use some interesting cases, like show you how not only that we have service, but how this service works, and the result. For instance, when we play with traffic manager, when we play with identity protection, you not only saw the service configuration but the result as well. And in this case, you may understand service much better than you just see how to configure that. But I cannot cover everything. So my suggestion to you, go to Microsoft Learn and see what courses does it have for this administration course, for Azure AD, for Azure administration, and see what gaps do you have and try to fill them. Also, Pluralsight offers free Azure administration course. I believe they offers all Azure courses for certification course for free. So just check it out. Pluralsight courses. And the most important, try it yourself. Try it. I think it takes time, of course, but from my perspective, it's much better to just open up docs.microsoft.com, find the service, and try to figure out and try to deploy it yourself. Try to figure out why do you need this service, how it works. Because when you do lab only, it's like when you do a lab, you have a guidance, step-by-step guidance, and you know exactly what to do. And usually when you do lab, it looks like monkey see, monkey do, but you may even not understand how it works, but you'll successfully complete your lab. But when you do it yourself without a lab guidance and just try to figure out how the service works, you will get much more from that. Of course, but you will spend more time. That's a downside. But my suggestion to you, try it yourself, especially try to figure out how it works. So let me stop to share my screen. And let me see if we have any questions in Q&A. I don't have any question here. All right, so let me start to wrap up the session. Hope it was informative for you, and thank you for your participation. Just if you need to contact me, you know my email address. So drop me an email if you have any questions about Azure or cybersecurity, and we can discuss. And I can discuss these questions with you. Have a good luck on your exam, and please answer some poll questions that Divyani has for you, and then at the end of this session. So thank you so much. Hope to see you and deliver some sessions for you again. And Divyani, feel free to start the poll questions.
Thank you so much, Sergey. And as our presenter mentions, I would like to ask a couple of questions from the audience in order to understand how has been the feedback of this training session as well as the series. The question with the answer options will appear on your screens now. Sorry for that. And the last question will appear on your screen now. So with this, we come to an end of our session today. I would like to thank our presenter for addressing today's topic in such an interesting way and engaging the audience to stay connected with us throughout the session. I would also like to thank our participants for their active participation throughout the session. I hope you enjoyed watching the whole session and more importantly, you have gained insight to Microsoft Azure certification. We hope to see you again in our upcoming training series in our next fiscal. Till then, you all have a wonderful day ahead and thank you so much for being with us today. Bye-bye.